spend your day with us today. Today is a day of celebration. We're celebrating our connections to each other, to our past, and to our communities. We have wonderful speakers and organizations with us today, and we hope you enjoy your time here in Boone County. I know this is a new spot, a new space for everybody, so we appreciate you giving us a chance in a new location. We really do hope you enjoy your day. A couple of housekeeping items. Did everybody get a History Day bag when you registered? Okay, if you didn't, we'll have extras available. There's a copy of your schedule. Info on the local history department here in Boone County. We're not going to have a table today because, you know, we're running around and stuff. So there's information in case you need to use our services. We have an evaluation sheet, mints and a pen, and a coupon for the cafe downstairs. We do have a cafe on site that's opening at 10 a.m. There's like, for the History Day special, there's like 3 different sandwich specials. You can choose between a grilled cheese, a chicken pesto panini, or a turkey club. Those are wonderful choices. A variety of soups, a ton of soups, chips, drinks, desserts, and the coupon is for 10% off your entire order today. So please, if you have an opportunity to get something to eat downstairs, maybe at the end after we're done today, you'll all be hungry. You can eat at the cafe instead of going across the way. On the first floor, okay, if you're going to the programs on the first floor, you get off the stairs or the elevator, you're going to head a hard right past the local history area. So it's at the end of the building by the big windows is the seating area for the first floor presentations. After the keynote address, please exit the building. You may want to buy some copies of the book. That's great. Everyone else, we need you to exit because we're going to put up the walls because this meeting room turns into 3 meeting rooms. So we want to make sure that we have it ready in time at 10:30 for your next set of presentations. So now, it is my pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker, Dr. Paul Tenkotte. Dr. Tenkotte is a professor of history and director of the Center for Public History at Northern Kentucky University. He came to NKU in July 2009 after 23 years at Thomas More College. Dr. Tenkotte received his PhD from the University of Cincinnati in 1989. While at Thomas More, he was the founder and director of the college's International Studies. At NKU, he has served as chair of the Department of History, Black Studies, and Women's and Gender Studies. His current projects include a weekly history series entitled Our Rich History for the Northern Kentucky Tribune. How many of you have ever read the Northern Kentucky Tribune online?
No.
It is a great resource for Northern Kentucky news and information. Boone County Public Library also puts in a lot of their articles and information in there. So if you need an online resource for Boone County information, Kent County information, all of Northern Kentucky, please consider looking online at Northern Kentucky Tribune. He also has co-authored a forthcoming book entitled Germany on Our Mind, German Americans in Cincinnati, 1790 to 1990. In addition, he chairs the History and Education Committee of the Covington Bicentennial Project and was appointed by Governor Steve Beshear to serve on the Kentucky Historic Preservation Board. He's got so much that he has done, Dr. Tenkotte. I was like, what can I cut out of here so I'm not talking for 20 minutes? So please welcome Dr. Tenkotte and please enjoy your programs today.
Yeah.
Thank you.
It's a pleasure to be here. Good morning.
Yeah. Good morning.
Today we're going to look at a beautiful example of architecture and art called Mother of God Church in Covington, Kentucky. First I need to start with a little story, a little joke. So there was a Sunday school teacher and she said to the children in her Sunday school class, she said, I want you all to draw a picture of the glory and the grandeur of God and His creation. And so she went around to look at all of the different pictures that the children were drawing, and she saw some beautiful ones, beautiful mountains and lakes and streams and rivers. And then she came to little Jimmy, and little Jimmy had drawn a circle, and emanating from the circle were all of these rays of light. And in the middle of the circle he was drawing in, he hadn't completed yet, some eyes and a nose and a little smiley face. And she said, "Little Jimmy, what are you drawing?" And he said, "You know, you're supposed to draw something that shows the grandeur and glory of God. Is that the sun?" And he said, "No, it's not the sun." He said, "This is the face of God." And she thought, well, this is a good teaching moment, right? She said, well, you know, little Jimmy, no one living has ever seen the face of God before. We don't know what God looks like. No artist, no one knows what God looks like." And he looked at her and said, "Well, you're in luck. Stick around a few minutes and you'll see." The glory and grandeur of God and His kingdom was something that 19th century immigrants, whether they be Italian, Irish, German, or whatever, if they were Catholic immigrants, they wanted their churches to reflect the glory and grandeur of God. They didn't want them to look like their houses at home, because these were literally houses of God that they were creating. Places that you were to go to and worship God, and in that worshiping you were to be uplifted by the surroundings. And by the way, the art and the paintings and the stained glass were supposed to teach you about your faith. Mother of God Parish recently celebrated its 175th year, heading towards 200. It was founded in 1841. It is the oldest German-American Catholic parish in northern Kentucky, and the mother parish of all the other German parishes that were founded from it. It is also now holds the distinction of being the second oldest surviving German-American parish in the Cincinnati region. The oldest being, of course, Old St. Mary at 13th and Clay in Cincinnati. The present church, which you see here depicted in a very old postcard, was constructed in 1870 and dedicated in 1871. We'll be concentrating on that. But first of all, let's take it back to 1841. For Catholics who were in Covington and indeed in Newport, there was really only one church, and it was an English-speaking church. It was called St. Mary's, and it would subsequently become what is now the Cathedral Basilica of the Assumption. But what about those who spoke German? Where were they to go? Well, a missionary priest to the United States by the name of Father Ferdinand Kohr, depicted there on the lower left-hand corner, came to the United States for one purpose. That is, to be a missionary. And he came and worked at a parish called Holy Trinity Church on West 5th Street in the west end of Cincinnati, which was demolished in the 1950s, this church. But it was the first German-American Catholic church in the entire region. And he left there and he began to work with the Catholics of Covington and Newport. And so he formed a little parish, and it met, I think, on the second floor of what was the post office building, and a little meeting room. And he organized in 1841 what became Mother of God, or in the German, Mutter Gottes Kirche. Mutter Gottes Gemeinde, that is Mother of God Church or Mother of God Congregation. And we have no photos, lithographs, illustrations, whatever, of that first church that was built in 1842 on the very site of the current church on West 6th Street in Covington. The best we can do is try to look at this lithograph that was made during the Civil War and is out of Frank Leslie's illustrated newspaper. It shows, and I've gone ahead and pointed out things there, so it shows the Civil War pontoon bridge, and you actually see the piers of the suspension bridge right there, okay, that had not been completed. St. Mary's Cathedral, the old one on East 8th Street, you see the tower there. City Hall had a tower, you see that. And you actually see, this building is actually still there, First Presbyterian Church on East 4th Street. It is now some kind of company. It's been completely restored without its tower. And then you see a tower over here, which we think was Mother of God Church, the original church. But that's the best we can do. So why were people coming? Why were German immigrants coming to Covington, to Newport, to Cincinnati? Well, these cities were very, very prosperous, and that is not to mean that they aren't prosperous today. But in the national scope of things, they were right up there. So that means literally in 1850 that Cincinnati was the 6th largest city in population in the United States. By 1860, that was 1850, in 1860, it was the 7th largest city in the United States on the eve of the Civil War. Why were people coming to this area? Well, many Germans were coming to an area which immigration historians call affectionately the German Triangle. And the points of the German Triangle were Milwaukee, St. Louis, and Cincinnati with its suburbs of Covington and Newport. And within that triangle, many German settlers, not all, but many German settlers arrived and settled and made new lives. And they did that because there were lots of jobs available. And it kind of reminded them of their homeland, especially the Ohio River, the Mississippi River, the hills, etc. Reminded them of their homeland in Germany. How many immigrants were arriving? Well, it's really phenomenal to look at the statistics. Let's look first at Covington. And the top number is 1870, the bottom number is 1880. So the percent of foreign-born in Covington by 1870 was almost 29%. Now notice, I said foreign-born. That doesn't include the children of foreign-born. So basically, once you add in the children, you're getting probably darn near close to 50% of the population of the city of Covington being probably German, Irish, Italian, English, Scottish. In other words, not, generally native speakers of English. Of course, the first generation of those immigrants would have been native speakers. But you would have heard also a lot of people who would have known 2 languages. They would have been bilingual. So you would have been walking down the streets of Covington, Newport, or Cincinnati and probably heard a lot of German. And you would have seen German language newspapers being sold by newsboys on the street corners, and those would have been readily available in all 3 cities. Now Newport has even a greater percentage of foreign-born, almost 32% in 1870. And Cincinnati was almost 37% foreign-born in 1870. What brought the immigrants here? The Ohio River. What brought them to northern Kentucky? Well, at first ferries ferrying across the river, but later on the John Roebling Bridge, which celebrates its 150th anniversary this year, as it was officially opened in 1867. And railroads. And Covington was the terminus of a railroad that went all the way to the south, and it was called originally the Covington-Lexington Railroad, or the Kentucky Central. And in fact, its terminus was just a block away from Mother of God Church at 7th and Washington Streets. That was before there was a bridge in the 1880s. Well, let me tell you just a little bit about these immigrants, because I still am fascinated, as I think all of you are, about how someone could pull up roots from their homeland and travel across the Atlantic Ocean, perhaps on a sailing ship in the early days of the 19th century, which would have taken about 3 months. 3 months on a ship. Have any of you ever been out at sea on a small, say, sailing ship in the Caribbean? Have any of you?
Yeah.
I was so proud of myself because I had been an international traveler. I had gone all over the world, and planes never bothered me, roller coasters never bothered me, you know. So I thought, you know, I'd go out on the Caribbean in this little 40-foot boat and take in the sights. Boy, did I become very seasick, as did many passengers at this time. I remember the story of one lady who actually gave birth. She was coming to Covington. She was pregnant and gave birth aboard a sailing ship. Can you imagine that? So what would they have undergone? Well, they were frightened, but conditions were so bad, mainly economically for these poor, mainly peasant peoples, that they would take up their roots and go to a strange land and look forward to the opportunities, the freedoms that it offered. And then whether they be Lutheran or Catholic, which generally most of the German immigrants seem to fall into one or the other category, they took as the patron saint of immigration, of people moving, of migrants, to be the Archangel Raphael, who's depicted here leading a very poor group of peasants on their journey. This is interesting because back in Germany there was a wealthy man, and his name was Peter Paul Hensley. And he had gotten his money from his father, who had a grocery business. And he said, you know, I really want to make some kind of difference in the world, some kind of mark in the world. So he founded what was called the St. Raphael's Verein, the St. Raphael Society. This was a society of volunteers that would meet immigrants headed for America at ports like Bremen and in Germany and help them along their way. And your first question may be, why do we need to help them? Well, they're coming from small towns where they knew everybody. They knew the good people, they knew the rotten people, the people they could trust, and the people they needed to be wary of. Then all of a sudden they get to the big city, a big port city like Bremen, and guess what happens? All the rotten people show up at the ports, and they try to hoodwink these poor immigrants and peasants. They've got a deal on a sailing ship, later on a steamship. By this time, a steamship to America. We got a cheap, you know, ticket for you. Except that it wasn't a real ticket on a real steamship. So rather than be hoodwinked, conned, con artists, these men of the St. Raphael Society had certain insignia on their clothes, and they helped the German immigrants. They helped them buy tickets on a steamship. They said to them, if they were Catholic, do you want to go to Mass before you leave? Do you want to go to confession? Is there anything you need? Can we help you in any way? And by the way, when you get to the United States, to New York City, many of them, you'll land at Castle Garden back then, later on Ellis Island, and you're going to look for people with the same insignia on their clothes. They'll be the St. Raphael Society, and they will help you. They will help you buy tickets on railroads to the interior. If you need a place to stay for a night or two, they'll put you up at a house they call Leo House. They'll help you, and you can trust them. So why this long tangent to the St. Raphael Society and to Leo House, the first Leo House for Catholic, German Catholic immigrants on State Street in New York is right there. It's because of this man, Reverend William Tappert, pastor of Mother of God Church. He was the president of the German American Priest Society in the United States. And one of his pet projects was to get involved in the St. Raphael Society to raise the money to buy the place that would become Leo House in New York City to help immigrants. I contacted Leo House in New York City. They still operate. They're not there for immigrants. They're there for school groups and other groups visiting the city who want inexpensive accommodations. And they don't have any decent archives left, so we can fill in the blanks. Let's assume that Father Tappert and others had brochures and contacts that said, come to Covington, come to Mother of God Church, come to Cincinnati. However, they decided to arrive. They arose, the German Catholic immigrants, in droves in the late 19th century. So much so that they had to build a new church, and they were already establishing other German Catholic churches while this was being built, like St. Aloysius and other places, St. Joseph and so forth. It still was too crowded, so they built this massive church, Mother of God Church, Covington, built 1870-71, with two massive 200-foot tall bell towers and a 150-foot tall dome in the back. The designers, the architects, were William Walter and William Stewart. We'll just tell a quick story about them. They were actually Protestant architects, which seems strange that a Catholic church chose a Protestant architect. But everybody chose them, and it was like all of the churches were trying to outdo one another. The first one to choose this architect was First Methodist Church, which is still down there at is it 5th and Green up in Covington? Just right at, I'm sorry, yeah, 5th, right? 5th? Yeah, 5th and Green. Right around the corner from the Kent County Library. And they had the first church built. And then right around the same time, First Baptist Church hired him. And First Presbyterian Church hired him. And Mother of God hired them. So the Catholics, the Baptists, the Methodists, and the Presbyterians all said, we want a great church architect to build our churches. It will be, our churches will be a civic embellishment, right? An embellishment to the city. Our gift to the city. We're making Covington beautiful, and also we're making the statement that we as immigrants have arrived. We've arrived financially. We're here to stay. We're here to contribute to society. Why is Mother of God Church an example of Italian Renaissance revival? It is an example of Italian Renaissance revival for many reasons, but we don't have the time to look at all of them. And one of them is the idea of balance or near symmetry. If you look at this church in an aerial view and you cut it in half, you would get a bell tower on one side and a bell tower on the other side, right? The same number of windows on one side and the other side. Half a dome on one side, half a dome on the other side. And if you look at the inside of the church and you cut it in half, you would also get balance or near symmetry, and you would get the same number of paintings on the left side, the right side. Everything is symmetrical, but not everything is the same. Symmetrical means absolutely the same, so they'd have to be the same paintings, and obviously they're not, so it's balance, or what is called near symmetry. And, you know, people that were looking at this architecture back then, actually people back in the 19th century knew more about architecture and symbolism than we do today, because our architecture is not often very symbolic, right? And they would have said, this is like God's kingdom. This is like heaven. You know, there are rules, and God has set up laws and laws of nature, and symmetry and balance and order and harmony is one of those things. This floor plan, courtesy of Hub and Weber Architects, it was wonderful. They came in, digitally, we had lost the blueprints over 100 and some years. So they digitally recreated everything and put it in graphics to show you all the different parts of the church. And there are even parts to the dome itself. The drum of the dome, the lantern of the dome, and of course the cross up above. If you look outside, there's also symmetry or near balance. So there's going to be a winged lion on one side and a statue of St. Peter on one side, and then a winged lion on the other side and a statue of St. Paul. Now the book that will be for sale afterwards explains all of this in great detail and actually takes you to the New Testament and or Old Testament verses, the Bible verses that deal with Jesus as the symbol of the winged lion. And in fact, there's so much symbolism here. This lion at the top is holding a tablet that has the alpha from the Greek alphabet. And the alpha is the first letter of the Greek alphabet. And the other one is holding the omega, which is the last letter of the Greek alphabet. So Jesus is the Alpha and the Omega, the first and the last, the eternal. All of this is very symbolic. Even when you look at St. Paul and St. Peter, the people of that time period would have known who was who. We wouldn't have had to explain that. St. Peter always had the keys in his hands because Jesus tells him, I will give you the keys to my kingdom. St. Paul always has the sword in his hand because he was a Roman citizen and the Roman Empire executed him for his beliefs in Christianity. And because he was a Roman citizen, he did not have to suffer the humiliation that non-citizens had to suffer, like crucifixion, but he had the privilege of being beheaded with the sword, right? So, there you go. People would have understood this symbolism. The church has been hit by a number of tragedies over the years. It's just like us as human beings. We get hit by things over the years, right? Usually unexpectedly. And in 1915, a tornado came through Covington. It did minimal damage, but it basically knocked out the middle of this facade that you see on the left. And after that, they rebuilt it in this fashion. And it was rebuilt by Samuel Hannaford and Sons, the very well-known architects of Cincinnati. And this Annunciation panel done in stone was completed by the Kenwright brothers in 1916. And you can read all about the sculptors, the Kenwright brothers, as well. And by the way, the complete title of Mother of God Church, I didn't tell you that, is the Annunciation of the Ever-Blessed Virgin Mary, Mother of God. So, since most people can't say that without taking a huge breath, then we call it just Mother of God, or those of us familiar will say M-O-G, okay?
M-O-G.
Now,
Right.
it is, for those of you who are Catholic, the feast day of the Annunciation of the Mother of God, when the Archangel Gabriel announced that she was to be, well, she accepted, and she had to accept it, right? She didn't have to accept it. She chose to accept it. And it's always celebrated usually on March 25th. Does anyone know why? Shame it. Because Christmas is celebrated on December 25th. Count it out, it's the 9 months. Okay, I'm very disappointed. We'll give you another chance and another question.
All right, good. Give us a break.
So, when you go into the church, above the high altar, there is in Latin, Essa Mater Tua. Sorry for the church Latin. I don't speak Roman Latin. They didn't teach us. In Catholic high school, they taught us church Latin, not the Roman Latin. So I say Veni Vidi Vici instead of Veni Vidi Vici or whatever. I don't know how it's pronounced by the Romans. It says, behold your mother. Behold your mother. What does that mean? It means it's an invitation to the congregation and to the visitors to behold scenes of Christ's mother, and hence their mother, the mother of the church, the patroness of Mother of God Church. And that means you're going to see some scenes in her life. You're going to see, by the great artist Johann Schmidt, the 5 joyful mysteries of the Rosary depicted. And that will be the Annunciation down there on the left, the Visitation on the right. And all of these things are replete with symbolism. If you look very hard here at the one on the Visitation, this is Mary and Mary's husband Joseph. This is her cousin Elizabeth and her husband. And under each of Mary and under Elizabeth, you see doves. Does anyone know what that represents?
The Holy Spirit.
The Holy Spirit. Why would the Holy Spirit be under each of these women? Because they are pregnant, and Mary is pregnant with Jesus, and you get one more chance. Elizabeth is pregnant with Jesus. John. Now I am extremely proud. We can't proceed.
We didn't know there'd be a test.
There is going to always be a test. Nativity. Presentation of the child Jesus in the temple for the ceremonial presentation of males, firstborn males, 40 days after. And then over here, in the finding of the child Jesus in the temple. Again, you could read all about this. They're just phenomenal. There are all kinds of Jewish elders listening to Jesus, and the ones back here have dropped their tablets. They are just totally amazed by his knowledge, and they are enraptured by what he's saying. And then there's this guy up front, and he is confused, and he's scratching his head. He doesn't know what's up. So, you know, again, it's all very biblically inspired, but fun too. There's fun symbolism in this stuff. Some of the oldest paintings are by William Lamprecht, a world-renowned artist from Germany who went back to Germany. His artworks appear in Canada and all throughout the United States. Wilhelm Lamprecht. He did the 4 evangelists, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Then there was a man who did all these resplendent and symbolic artwork. It's called a stucco work because it's 20 years after the church was completed. So the plaster work was as dry as, you know, the Sahara. If it were fresh plaster, it would be fresco, which they do on fresh. This is dry plaster, so they call it a secco work. And he did the glorious mysteries of the Rosary, the sorrowful mysteries of the Rosary. He did the 7 sacraments. He did and so you have an example of a sorrowful mystery over here, glorious mysteries over here. Here's the winding sheet. A winding sheet would have been, after Jews died, they were wrapped in a winding sheet, right? And so the resurrection is often represented by a winding sheet that's unwrapped. It's unwrapped. He didn't need it anymore. He didn't need that anymore. Over here, this is absolutely beautiful. This is matrimony, and you can actually see that it's like a candlestick, except it's really a vase, like a 3-tiered vase. And over here, this part of the vase has a wilting flower. I mean, this thing's pretty dead. And this one has a wilting flower. But then there's just one vase that comes together, and the flower is blooming. Do you know what that symbolizes in terms of marriage? You have given, right, death to yourselves and found new life in the unity of your marriage. These almost carpet-like tapestries, they look like tapestries, they look like Persian carpets, are all over the ceiling of Mother of God Church. and really need to be seen. These are also the work of Wenceslaus King. You can see them here along with many of the stained glass windows as we're standing at the main altar and looking back towards the marvelous Kenken and Grimm organ. There was another internationally known artist called Melchior Paul van de Schwanden. He was a Swiss artist. He never left Switzerland. He lived, he might have visited someplace. He lived there the rest of his life, and he produced the 14 Stations of the Cross that are in the church as well. Cradle of the Arts, two internationally known artists, nationally and regionally known artists. Pretty impressive. The high altar itself is an example of that. The crucifix was by a sculptor, Ferdinand Moore, in 1871. The statues of Mary, John, and Mary Magdalene at the foot of the cross are by Meyer and Company of Munich, Germany. They are hand-carved wood covered with a thin layer of plaster or gesso and hand-painted. The altar is hand-carved by Schroeder Brothers in 1890-91. And if you like carvings, then besides, if you like paintings, then Mother of God is for you. If you like hand-carved things, Mother of God is for you, such as this beautiful communion rail angel by Herman Brockman in 1890-91. And you need to go visit the church yourself and look at how beautiful the angel's face is. Well, I dare say she looks angelic. The ambo, that is the pulpit, is also beautiful and contains all kinds of stories. One is of the Good Samaritan. One is one of my favorite stories from the Bible, the prodigal son. And this is hand-carved by Carl Dannenfelser in 1890-91. The stained glass is phenomenal and will knock your eyes out. Was by Meyer and Company of Munich. And it's so fun because you can spend forever in the church, and I have spent 30 years researching the church and still finding things. Here is Jesus at the wedding feast of Cana, his first miracle, and here is the attendant, and he's pouring the water out of the water jugs. And as he's doing it, you can see, you need to come up here and look at it with a magnifying glass, sorry for that. But it's actually turning from water into red wine. So, you can look in the stained glass and find these just really interesting things. And there, it doesn't end. Because it wasn't only known for architecture and art, it's known for its contemporary ensemble, one of the first ones established in the Diocese of Covington. It was known for a man who put out 69 editions of a hymnal and prayer book in German called the Gesang and Gebetbuch, Bernard Heinrich Francis Hellbusch, who was the music director there, taught in the school. And so if you've heard little songs like "There Come Little Children," or "Hail Holy Queen enthroned above," or "Holy God, we praise thy name," if you've ever heard those songs, they were all used in Germany, and he put this anthology of these common hymns together in German. And of course, they crossed over into American ecclesiastical life in churches and now into English. He is one of the main people responsible for that happening, for bringing those to the United States and popularizing it. And then there's this handsome devil man, Karl Litzenmeyer, who's sitting over there. I heard him. And he was choral director for 25 years. And he picked up everything Bernard Heinrich Francis Hellbusch did, and did it in the original German and Latin, right?
Oh, most of it.
Most of it, okay. So, what happens? Tragedies happen. Oh my Lord. It should be September 25th, 1986. I hit the wrong key. Not September 15th. September 25th, 1986, there was a massive fire in the dome at Mother of God Church, caused by a welder who was trying to fix what they called, that hit in the area, they called a microburst. They didn't call it a tornado. And he accidentally set the dome on fire. It caused $1.5 million worth of damage. We put the church back, and by we, I and another parishioner, Vic Canfield, volunteered our time to get the artisans and the architects and the engineers and everyone together, and on a daily basis went down to talk to all of these people and to put the church back together. And so it was. And it actually reopened by July of 1987. So there are wonderful stories in this area of places that have been hit by tragedy, like fires. One of them, and put back even more resplendent than ever, and with modern conveniences like air conditioning and so forth, which you try to get air conditioning kind of shoved into a building that originally had stoves that, you know, it's a task. So, and then there's the recent story that you can find all about at the Rabbit Hash Historical Society, and Don Clare will be happy to tell you about, of the beautiful restoration of our own little Rabbit Hash general store after the tremendous fire. And so there are people like Don Clare and me and others who say, okay, tragedy happens, and out of it grows the love of a community, the support of a community. I remember right after the fire, we had to set up, you know, the firemen set up the yellow, you know, lines, and you weren't supposed to, it said do not cross, right? And we went into the church to determine some things, and there was a young lady, maybe in her 20s, and she was in the bench crying. And I approached her and I said, is there something I can help you with? And she said, I grew up across the street. And she agreed, she was very poor at that time. And she said, when Father Klosterman was pastor, I used to come over here and I would look all around and I would admire the church and I would run up and down the aisle. And my mother would come and she would say, now you shouldn't be running all around a church like this and playing inside the church. And Father Klosterman said, don't worry about it. She's not bothering anyone. She's having fun. She's not hurting anything. You should be happy inside a church. She always remembered that, and as she got older, she said, you know, I'm not Catholic. I'll never become Catholic. But when I've really been troubled by things in life, I come into this church and I look all around and I see the glory and the grandeur of God here, and I feel a sense of peace, and I can meditate, and when I leave the church, I always feel better. And then she looked at me and said, almost into me, it sent, you know, goose pimples up and down me. She looked at me, who she didn't know from Adam, and say, you have to put this church back the way it was. And we did. And so stories are told of communities coming together, and a story is told of the Sunday school teacher, right? I think it's telling me that I'm almost done. So the Sunday school teacher told the children in her class, well, we'll just call her Mrs. Wilson or whatever, but the Sunday school teacher told the children that they need to draw a picture of something from the life of Jesus. And so she went around the room and she was looking at all kinds of things, you know, curing the blind, curing the sick and the ill, multiplying the loaves and fishes. And she came to little Jimmy, and little Jimmy had actually drawn an airplane with 3 windows, and looking out the one window was a man, and looking out the other one a woman, and the other one a little boy. And she said, well, Jimmy, this is a teaching moment. Little Jimmy, this is a beautiful picture of an airplane, but what does this have to do with the life of Jesus? And she said, oh, it's easy, teacher. He said, this is Jesus, this is Mary. and this is Joseph, and this is the flight into Egypt. So, I have taken you on a flight. I have been your pilot, you have been my passengers, and we have been at the 30,000 foot level. It's hard to see things at the 30,000 foot level. To really see things, you have to land the plane and you have to go and see for yourself. So go down to Mother of God, and if things are locked up, they are for security purposes, but during the week, that's all you have to do is hit the doorbell on the side of the church, and they'll buzz you in, and if you let them know in advance, they'll even set up a tour for you, and maybe someday you'd be interested, and I'll give you a tour, call me up, whatever. Take a tour for yourself, and now comes the shameless promotion. And if you can't do that, then buy the book, which it's on sale instead of $21.99 today, special price of $15 or 3 for $40. Find 2 other friends and buy 3 of them and save. So thank you very much for your rapt attention, and if I can answer any questions, I'd be happy to do that.